Hey y'all, welcome back to Resilient and Rowdy. This is your host, Jazz. Hello, what's up? Today we have a special guest, James Spearman. Welcome.
Hey, Jess, thank you so much for having me on. It's really an honor to be on your show, and I really appreciate the work you're doing. I've been deployed. You're a service member as well. You get it. And mental toughness and your mental health is really important. And I'm excited to get into this with you.
Me too. I am super excited, super nervous. All right, if y'all follow along the shenanigans on Instagram, I travel a lot for work. I'm usually, running back and forth in the Delta Lounge or the Delta Wing. And I'm like, man, there's so many pilots everywhere. Wow. Just seeing them talk and chit chat. And I'm just like, oh my God, I should have a pilot on the podcast. And lo and behold, it falls into my lap. Literally. I'm so grateful. I'm super excited. So, James, let's see. Ooh, I mean, you do a lot. I'm really nervous here. Hear me out. But all right, James, for those that don't know you, what is a little bit about you, your background, and what kind of led you to be here today?
I started off as a Air Force mechanic and got my degree at Middle Tennessee State University. I was pretty committed. My dad got me around airplanes when I was little. I knew airplanes were going to be my thing. My grandfather flew in World War II. He flew B-25s in the Pacific, and I got pictures of him on the wall with hanging his arm out the window with bullet holes down the side of the airplane. He did like something like 50 missions or something in the Pacific, which is just awesome. Unfortunately, I never got to meet him. But then my dad started taking me to air shows when I was little, and I just got the bug. Unfortunately, like my family was in turmoil when I was little. My parents split up and had a lot of financial trouble growing up, and airplanes were like my escape, right? Like fly away, get away from it. But when I was younger, I got a job as a busboy, and I would take my entire check, which was $115 a week, which is like tips and everything, right? So take my entire paycheck and just give it to my flight instructor and get 1 hour of flight instruction per week. And I was like 14, 15 years old and really set in. I made up my mind like this is what I want to do with my life. And obviously, if you grow up in a traumatic household and you don't get spun the wrong way, right around the time I was turning 17, 18, I was like, I need to get that, where to get the F out of here. Right. So luckily my dad though was, pointing me in the direction of, hey, you really need to join the services like your grandfather. And I was like, okay, yeah, how far does that get me away from here? So I talked to the local guard unit and they said, hey, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to be an Air Force pilot. They're like, okay, you got a ways to go. You need to get your degree. But first, what would be great is you come out here and be a mechanic for us. It comes with a sign-on bonus. You'll go through basic training. We'll help you get through college, and then you'll have your shot at going to Air Force pilot training, which is one of the armed services has very high washout rate, and it's 2 years long, right? You can fake 2 months. You can't fake 2 years. It's a 2-year program. You got to really want it. And so that's what I did. I joined. I was like, where do I sign? And they're like, you got to wait till you're 18. And I was like, oh, all right, I'll come back. And so 18th birthday, signed the paperwork, went to basic training, and then kept going, got my degree. And then eventually they sent me to Air Force pilot training. I just proved to them that this is what I really wanted to do. And having that experience along the way, I always was thinking about entrepreneurship. My dad was an artist, and that's why we struggled financially growing up. But I never watched him have a job. And so I was like, it's pretty cool. I'd like to at least take my shot at some point. And so I was coming back from pilot training, and I knew I had some security with the guard base, and now might be the time to take my shot. I was reading books like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was reading everything I could possibly get my hands on, and I was actually going to buy a Froyo, but luckily this aircraft maintenance shop came up first. I think that turned out way better. So now somehow I've figured out how to make my entire living off of airplanes and, have a good opportunity to affect the people around me and really just grow. So it's been an awesome ride.
Wow. Okay, James, that is first and foremost, I'll say that that's a really beautiful way to visualize trying to walk away from a chapter so heavy with dealing with that in your upbringing and your childhood. And I'm sorry to hear that, but just the simile of being a pilot so you could fly away. It reminds me of Jenna from Forrest Gump. She's, I
Yeah,
wish I was
that's
a bird so I could fly far away. And as
right.
silly as it sounds, you literally did that. You hustled. Like, so in retrospect, your check at that time, you were probably making some decent money and you said some tips, but that is absolute sacrifice of you knew it would only get you an hour, but you saw the investment, you saw the opportunity and the longevity of that career. And I think that's also beautiful in and of itself, like making those sacrifices to build up that dream. Clearly, it has paid off so well for you, and I'm so proud of you. Like you mentioned, it has a really high washout rate. I can't imagine like that mentality that you had to push yourself to be in for 2 years, especially. Can you walk us a little bit through that? Like you said, you can't fake it for too long.
Yeah. So, which I'll say, just a caveat to that is, you mentioned there's actually the statistics out there. The most successful people in our like world came from a very traumatic childhood. There's almost like it's a very high percentage
Oh,
of
hell
the
yeah.
people,
All
which
right,
is
here we go.
yeah, military training really helped me. It started with Air Force basic training, which there's a saying, right? Like you wake up and if I can just make it to breakfast, I'll be good. And then you're like, all right, I made it to
Okay.
breakfast. If I can get to lunch, I'll be all right. And so you and somebody told me that like if you just don't quit, you're probably gonna make it. You're probably gonna be fine. And that's a lot of advice that people get to go make it through basic training. Going into Air Force pilot training, I had I felt like the weight of I didn't wanna let my grandfather down, didn't wanna let my family down, and then, "Oh, yeah, this is, like, my dream," and it probably internalized a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have, like, maybe have my identity in passing this thing, which is not good, but I told the commanders that hired me, "If you send me to Air Force pilot training, you won't regret it. They will have to drag me out of the cockpit kicking and screaming. I will not quit." And the reason why I bring that up is there's a lot of people that they send to Air Force pilot training and realize, "Oh, crap, I don't like flying that much." And you'd be so surprised, and they make it, like, through 6 months of it, and they're just like, "F this, I'm done." And they
That's
wash themselves out.
crazy. Oh, wow.
Then, while you're there, like, your best friends, you become such a tight-knit group because you're spending that training is 12 hours a day, every single day, so and under their lock and key for 12 hours a day, every day, and your best friends around you, they're going home because they're not good enough. They failed one too many rides. They did, and you're just like, "Oh, man, that could have been me. I thought he was better than me, and now he's going home." And so your dream's on the line every morning and or every day, every ride actually that you do. And the resiliency that I think that taught me really did prepare me for owning a business because sometimes, just like I said, there may be a friend of mine that was actually, he's a better stick and rudder or he knew the books better than me, but he went home because, hey, sometimes you get unlucky. He drew the wrong ride or had the wrong weather day or just something going on at home and you failed. I think it's 3 rides in a row, you're gone. And so and so sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. And but you can't focus on, the result. You need to focus on what's it gonna take for you to be successful today? What are the things that I can control? I can't control the instructor that I'm gonna get. And some guys or girls got unlucky. There was girls in our class too. They would get unlucky and get the wrong instructor who's the hard ass and would send them home or whatever. I can't control that. I can't control the weather. I can't control the check ride that I drew. But what I can control is just focusing on what's going to make me successful. And that's getting a good night's sleep, studying, and then trying to handle. Back then, I didn't have probably a good mechanism for handling stress. The Air Force in general, but probably the military in general, has a really bad culture of alcohol, probably an unhealthy relationship with it, but you got to focus on the main thing and keep that squarely in front of you. And because you can have bad inputs and have a good result because you got lucky, you can also have really good inputs and have a bad result because you got unlucky, right? So you can't let that define who you are. Each day, just do the right things, and your worth comes from within. That's stuff that I've been working on as a business owner now, which I wish I would have worked on back then. If I have the best month ever, I have the same self worth that I'd had when I had the worst month ever. And so All I need to do is focus on what does James need to do today to be successful. And that's call so many people, talk to so many customers, deal with my team, those sorts of things.
Yeah. I think that's really important, whether you're talking about like your day to day business operations or when you're in the cockpit or doing maintenance, you're not carrying that baggage from yesterday or last month. It's a fresh start. You reevaluate things, you reevaluate yourself. I feel like being in pilot school or being a businessman, you really have to have a solid head on your shoulders and like cutting out all of the slack that seems very unnecessary. I feel like it almost forces you to have that perspective. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's not easy, right? So what is it like complacency is just kills success, right?
Yeah.
Taking the easy road. And yeah, you can't do it there or you're gonna go home.
And I think that was really humble of you to say, wow, like this guy next to me is better than me doing this or that. And yet he still got cut. I think that also humbles you of I could be better, but I could still fail. So it sounds like you did everything within your power to one, you're obviously not slacking, but two, to constantly improve. I think that's really important too.
So back then, I was probably a little bit more cocky when I'd get in the cockpit, which I had experience flying prior to getting there, right? All my friends who were there, they'd never flown a plane before. So
Oh,
most of them had not. I already had my pilot's license
okay.
and I didn't tell anybody either. And I had this mindset where, like, I'm going to hop in the cockpit with this instructor and I'm going to blow his world. This is going to be the best I ever saw. And that's the mindset that I took on each one. And now that's not healthy, right?
Yeah,
Now,
maybe.
having that self-confidence to be able to do that, but not wrap it up like your self-worth in that.
Oh, yeah,
If you have a
for
bad
sure.
ride, you just gotta brush it off, move on to the next one, not,
Yes.
like, build up momentum.
But also, I'm glad that you didn't tell anybody because what if you failed and you're like or the guys in your class,
Oh,
the
yeah.
gals are like, "Oh, the pilot failed." But
Yeah.
like you said, you put it very frankly, you could have an unlucky day. And I think that's probably the most frustrating part. I could not imagine putting in all of that work, that effort, the sacrifices to show up to have that privilege of going through pilot school commercially or with the military and then you map out the wrong thing like you mentioned and you're done. Like, oh, so how did you deal with that stress? I feel like you briefly mentioned it. Like sometimes you just don't know. You just show up. Like it's a reset. But how did you happen to manage that type of pressure and stress?
I some healthy habits, I think, was going to bed until I was, like, 100% confident with the check ride that's coming the next day, and then I'm gonna go to bed. I'll go to bed when it's right. But then, yeah, there's definitely then I wasn't working on myself as much. Probably what I should have been doing is going on walks, going to the gym. But what we were doing is partying on the weekends and drinking to excess. Yeah, obviously not anything dangerous or mixing it with work, but when we were off the clock, that's what we would do. It did teach me some negative habits that I had to fix when I got into the business world because I had to in the business world, it got to the point where, now all of a sudden, yeah, in pilot training, sure. If I get sent home, I'm going to be really disappointed. All my friends back home are going to know I failed, all that sort of stuff. If I fail now, I've got 6 employees and their families that rely on me. Big difference. It's not just
Absolutely.
me that's affected anymore. So at one point, I would get rashes up my arms. I'd throw up like twice a day from the stress, and I just could not. And my self worth was wrapped up around like how the business is doing. Yeah, and the relationships in my life. So it was tough, and so I had to start like untraining myself that okay, these habit patterns are not helping you. They're detracting from where what you want. And for me, I wanted to eventually have a very healthy relationship with my daughter. Me and her mom are separated. So it's kind of a dicey relationship, but I knew I want to be a good dad for her. And I want to be a good business owner. I want to be a good husband. I want to be these things. And I had to look back and say, okay, what are the habit patterns that are actually sabotaging my goals? And so there, I just put out a list. Okay, the stuff that I learned in pilot training, some of it was bad, right? Drinking to handle the stress, that's bad. That is hurting. It's taking me away from the things that I want. And then I started putting out a list. Okay, what are my goals? Like I wanted to drop weight. I wanted to get so many sales, yada, yada, yada. And so what do I need to do? Okay, I need to limit my calories to this. Start enforcing the positive habit patterns that are going to start taking me towards the goals that I really want in life. And so a lot of times people just refer to that as like sabotaging habit patterns that you just get accustomed to. You don't realize that they're there for a while. And so,
I think the ability to like self assess and have that self awareness is absolutely crucial to any form of success or accomplishments. And I can really admire that in anybody who's willing to sit down and take a really hard look at themselves. As they say on the internet, as the kids say, they're like, oh, you can be delulu as a treat. And I'm just like, no, being delusional is dangerous. If you aren't in check with yourself, you're holding yourself back. And especially in a profession like this, and as a business owner, you have people depending on you. So that ability to harness and hone in and be just 100% real with yourself is so important. And I'm really glad that you have that ability, as well as like how you mentioned before, you had a challenging upbringing, and people don't realize how childhood trauma and or even just a rocky childhood, just certain things happen, can really skew your perception and your behavior. It doesn't necessarily excuse that behavior, but it does give you the reasoning of why you do that. And so as you grow into an adult, you're saying these wonderful things and goals that you have for yourself, but for anybody who hasn't had to experience that, they're like, "Oh yeah, everybody wants those things." But when you have that upbringing, it really challenges your perspective and also like your ability to even show up for that. Like you'll self-sabotage, like you said, or you feel like you don't deserve those things. In your professional and your personal life, it sounds like you're really just trying to put in the effort to show up better, especially when you have a child with someone that you're no longer with. I can really admire that as a man, as a father. You might not have that relationship with them anymore, but you can still show up and be present and, you know, be the good father that you've always envisioned yourself to be. So that takes a lot of maturity. And I really hope that for my audience is actually a little bit more, it's like 56, almost 60% men that listen to the podcast. So I hope y'all are taking notes. That's always good to see. And I will always give everybody their roses when it comes to stuff like that. So I'm really proud of you. I know that has not been easy, your professional and your personal endeavors. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
no, I appreciate the opportunity. And I hope somebody listening out there does start looking into it because just like you said, if you came up from a traumatic childhood, you don't realize like in your childhood, you probably have to just do what it takes to survive, right? And not like maybe literally, but more of like in my household, there's cops being called and holes getting punched in walls, all kinds of crazy stuff. So I did what I said, what I had to say to survive, right? To survive that situation. And then I wondered why I was such a people pleaser in my business.
Oh my gosh, the people pleasing. Yeah, and that's part of the process is like calling yourself out. And there's some good things that can come from people pleasing, but not to the extent of where you know how they say like you pour the excess of your cup. You don't pour out of your cup. If you're pouring into others too much that you're draining yourself, it's not like an inherently bad thing, but with the people pleasing, it's almost at the cost of your livelihood. So you probably can't show up great as a boss or as a friend or as a husband if you're over pouring into something or someone. You have to balance it all.
Oh yeah, we're probably talk about the same thing. I don't know about your background, but it sounds like we're similar-ish in this area. But yeah, I would do things at my detriment, right? Just because I thought, it might gain loyalty. And that's actually the big key that I worked on was that, and you talked about it being out of touch with reality, being delusional. You can't make somebody happy. You're actually trying to jump into them and make them happy. Is this somebody working with me? Like manipulative that is?
Oh my god. Yes.
I was
When
like,
you
"Damn," and I just never saw it that way. I thought it was a gift that I had. I was
yeah,
like, "Oh, I can really make people happy," and I
yeah,
thought that. I actually believed that. He's, "No, you're out of touch with reality, and
yeah.
you're really sabotaging yourself because you're doing things to your detriment, in hopes that it's going to create something. It's going to create loyalty with your staff, or it's going to make this person buy from you or whatever. When
Yeah.
you really what you need to do is focus on, yeah, you can make it a win, but it's like, why are you doing it? Is it something you actually enjoy? Is it going to benefit both of you? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
tough. That one was really tough for me.
Ooh, preach. Especially because I had to recognize that I had a little bit of a savior complex with the
Go
healing
for it.
journey. And last year I turned 30. That was a big like milestone in my life. And I was like, oh, I feel good. I just want other people to feel good and to be at peace, like how I feel. And I would set myself up for failure because you can only lead a horse to water and you can't force them to drink. Now, for the people that have been listening to me for a couple years now, I say the same kind of mundane tidbits or like advice or quotes, but there's no other way to really put it. And so that was part of the savior complex and the people pleasing is like, oh, if I can make them heal, if I can make them feel better, then I'll feel better. And I'm like, this is so selfish and manipulative.
Yeah.
Like I can't. I can only literally figuratively lead you to water. It's on you. Some people just aren't ready, but I know that I guess like for this instance is I'm always here when you are ready. I can't do the work for you, but I know how I feel and how much I've overcome, and I never thought I would ever reach the levels that I have. And that's not something that I want to gatekeep either, but I can't do the work for other people. So I'm here. I'll listen. If you're ready to get connected to some resources and feel better and elevate and be at peace, like I got you, but I can't do it for you, unfortunately, as much as I wish I could. What was that? It's like a Miss Universe like pageant question. It's I just want world peace.
Yeah, that's right. Or do you watch Wicked? Did you
I
watch
yes. Oh my god.
Linda, right? That's what she
Yes.
is. Yeah, she's
Galinda, yes.
actually it's like a super, yeah, example of what we're talking about. She's manipulating everyone with her magic, right? So
Exactly. Oh my god. Oops. Called me out. But
that's awesome that it's such a relief off your shoulders that because you have a tendency, I don't know about you, sorry, myself, I have a tendency, what I would do is I'd become their emotion. I wouldn't empathize with them, and this is where somebody who's working with me, like, empathy is where you can relate with somebody. Yeah, you're struggling with that. I struggle with that too. I can understand where you're coming from. That's empathy. But when you become somebody else's emotions and feelings, you're becoming that. And that is manipulative. And it's just such a burden that you bear when now I can realize and say something like, I can say something to somebody and they're in a bad mood. I can tell they're upset or whatever. And I'll just walk away because I don't know. Maybe their dryer went out. Maybe that they're going through something that I cannot control in any which way. And it's not my burden to make them happy. And it's so relieving.
absolutely. And this is like part of why I do talk about mental health a lot is you'd be surprised at the things that it can help alleviate pressure or stress or just that burden of all of those thoughts. And yeah, that was a very logical and reasonable way to approach things. Sometimes whatever someone is going through has absolutely nothing to do with you. All you can do as a friend or as a boss, as a leader, is just make sure that it's known within your crew, within your friends and family that you're there for someone to rely on if they need a conversation, if they just need a shoulder to cry on or some advice or just a safe space to vent. That's all you can do, and it's up to them if they take it up on your offer or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of that, Air Force, you're also business, civilian, commercial. What do you think about the perspective of mental health within the aviation community, whether military or civilian or both?
Yeah, it's really unhealthy, to put it bluntly. We have to pass a medical, right, and to keep our flying status in the military or on the civilian side. And so there's a tendency, and the joke is, you tell your real doctor what's wrong with you. You tell the FAA doctor nothing. You tell them everything is great, never been better. And most of the time, they're telling both that, nope, I'm great. There's no issues, nothing, because they're worried about losing their flying status. And it's actually a misconception. It's not true. And so, you don't, obviously you go to different doctors for specific things, but it is important to focus on being the best version of yourself rather than try to internalize all this because you're afraid of losing your flying status. You could actually be that much better of a pilot, right? Husband, wife, whatever. If you just focus on yourself, actually, it sounds selfish to me. That used to sound selfish. I was like, never focus on myself,
Yeah,
but
I completely agree. I think that's something I learned, I think, in the first few years of therapy, is butchering that word and the terminology of selfish and selfishness. And especially when you're, I'm calling myself out, codependent, chronic people pleaser, doing things for yourself is selfish. And growing up, like, the connotation with selfishness was always negative. um but if you don't pour into yourself, you can't pour into others, you can't show up as well as you want to. And I think that's a really important lesson for a lot of folks to learn and decipher. Also, for the chronically online, is like, you are not the main character all the time. There are so many other components and people in your life. This is not a movie. This is not a game. This is real life that has real life consequences. It touches back on the delusional, the delulu. And I know people are joking sometimes, not all the time. Some of y'all are serious, and that concerns me. But there is a difference between doing things for yourself, like self care, health and wellness, things to relieve stress. And also, like how you mentioned before, like taking a look at some of those behaviors that you feel like are like self sabotagey and just not good for you, versus just being entirely full of yourself and only your needs are important. So, selfish doesn't always have to mean what society has built it up to be. So, I'm really glad that you brought that up.
yeah, the best way that finally made it click to myself, we talked about this before I came on. Somebody broke it down and said, James, do you think it'd be good for, let's say, your daughter, if you were the 10.0 version of yourself? Do you think it'd be good for her? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, what about the friends around you? You think it'd be beneficial to them if you were the 10.0 version of yourself? What about your wife? What about your family? And I was like, yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I just never could view it that way before because I always thought I need to put myself second, actually.
Yeah, it's a tough habit to break for sure. But one thing that I find myself doing, I'm a little amateur philosopher, I've got the gray hair, is I find myself trying not to bash on society because I am part of society. We are part of society. And it's flawed, just like anything and anyone else. But my thing is, when you heal, when you take care of yourself, when you show up better, when you're successful in your personal and professional life, that gets the ball rolling with bettering society. And especially for those who have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, that's part of that. And I think that is so beautiful. I had Nora Latuja on recently, and she is a recent mother. And I shared my feedback that I would get from others because I am not married yet. And I don't have kids yet, but I am always trying to observe and learn from others, especially those that have stepped into parenthood. And so that is something that I'm really glad you brought up because, like I said, we point fingers and we talk crap about society, but we are society. But you're doing something about that, especially in fatherhood and how you show up as a father. I'm in that weird space of online keyboard warriors that are always just bashing on women. And I think sometimes we forget that we were all babies and children at some point. So it's sometimes the hate is so disgusting. And I'm just like, dude, I really hope that someone didn't talk to you like that growing up, or even a colleague or a friend. There's just too much of that. And I don't see enough healing, self awareness, trying to be better, or the things that sometimes people say about each other. I would hope that they would never say to their children. I think that really puts things into perspective of what you're putting out there, the energy that you're putting out there, the words that you're putting out there. So the fact that you can pour into yourself with the importance of showing up better for your daughter, especially with someone like you that has had a challenging childhood. I think you're breaking the cycle, and that's really beautiful. So I really hope that my audience can sit with that and maybe do a little self check of how am I falling short in my parenthood journey? How could I be better? What were things that I didn't have as a child that I could do now? Because it heals like a part of you. Like the Grinch when his heart grows. It's such a wholesome feeling. And then seeing that the face on your child when they feel loved and safe and secure, it's just, there's nothing like it. Like I said, I just really admire that. And I'm really proud of you for doing that work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a long road, and oftentimes, and really, I set out one of the kind of peak moments that was really tough for me. I got some wise advice to James. Maybe you should focus on healing your child trauma. That would be what's best for you, your family, your daughter. You can't really control everything else outside of it. And they start with trying to understand, what am I feeling? And then, where is it coming in my body? Like, where do I feel that in my body? Normally it's on your chest or in your head. And then try to walk that back to the earliest time that you felt that feeling. It's normally in your childhood. Um, the about a year and a half ago, was probably the most tumultuous financially for me. I got deployed and had to operate the business from like thousands of miles away. And I also brought on a failed partnership. That was my fault. And I was living in this space. And when I started doing this, I was like, okay, walked it back. And it actually took me back to when I was living in a one bedroom apartment with my dad, my two brothers. I was like, wow, I've been living in this space for the past year and a half. I need to let that go. And a lot of my customers are business owners, right? And somebody told me something that always stuck. It's, James, money amplifies who you are. If you're struggling with alcohol right now, you tack on a few zeros, it's gonna be way worse. If you've got, I fortunately for me, I didn't have any like a drug addictions. If that's what you're struggling with, it's going to be way worse. If you're extremely codependent and a people pleaser right now, it's going to be way worse if you tack zeros onto that. And so, really, I'm super grateful for the past 2 years. It's forced me to get better, so that I'm actually like glad like God was working on me to, because I wasn't ready. I was not
Yeah.
ready.
That's beautiful. Oh my God, I might cry. I love that because I feel like if you are constantly running from yourself and these problems, I've heard this phrase years ago and I can't remember from where, but it's like you're in a labyrinth of suffering and you meet those dead ends if you don't do different and choose differently and think differently. So it's hard work. It's not easy by any means. We can show up here peppy and motivational on this episode, but it's not to take away from that journey, but it builds character, as they say in the military. But I do want to touch a little bit on like your deployment. And like you mentioned, you had a lot going on with the business. And obviously, personally, you're far away from family. Can you walk me through what that experience like was for you?
Yeah. So this most recent one, that had the business, and I was deployed to Qatar. And it was the first time to really force me to actually, start working through people, because if you've got a lot of child trauma, and my thing is like, I could never win the love of my mom, right? So James is the hero all the time. Like, everyone has problems. Let me fix it. Let me fix that, walk around. And so it's just for your own business, it's like a super unhealthy way for you to just like spin out of control with people pleasing and solving everybody's problems. Unchecked way to do that. Now he'd pull me aside and send me overseas to 1,000 miles away, or several thousand miles away. And I can't fix it physically anymore. I have to work through people, or we're all gonna go out of business. And so luckily, I made some bad hires and I made some good hires all at the same time. And it really showed me, who I could rely on and actually start, instead of trying to solve everybody's problems. It's okay. What, you hired them to do this job. How about you let them do that job and just hand this to them and expect them to do it, actually delegating, not let me solve
Yep.
all your problems, right?
Right. Or the micromanaging. Ooh, it can be hard. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm still the person that did all the sales though. So just that, in a small business, the owner is like the salesman usually. And so we would do an 8-hour combat sortie, and we'd come back my crew would go to the bar because they're done with the day, and I got to go to work. I got
Mm.
to hop on the phone and start talking to people about maintenance and where their plane's at, and collect credit cards. And, oh yeah, how are you doing back home? So
With the time difference too.
yeah, it was really tough. And then, not to mention, I'm away from my daughter for a long period of time. That actually ended up working really well. We got a VR headset and we would play games with each
Oh,
other
that's awesome. I love that.
each day. So I really focused on, I just, again, try to focus on what I can control. So I ended up losing weight. I ended up, you know, doing the best I could. The business definitely took a hit. And then when we got back, it was rough. A lot of my team that I would use dollars to just hope and it would buy loyalty. I realized, okay, that's not healthy. You should pay them for their job and expect them to do their job.
Right. It's natural, it's human to assume, but, ultimately, it can be a test of their character as well. Not sure how it looks like day to day in your maintenance bay. You're showing up, you're taking accountability, you're trying to make sure that the vibes are good. It's a healthy work environment. That can be very hard to find. So sometimes if somebody walks away, even when you didn't inherently do anything wrong, they'll learn that each bay is going to be different. Each management leadership style is going to be different. And it could be for the better, it could be for worse. Thankfully, I feel like you carry yourself really well, and it might hurt a little bit, but I'm sure that if they were to come back, you would probably have them with open arms. You know what I mean?
It taught me to, you need to take responsibility, right? Like, even if they were the worst ever, right? Who hired them? Right. So you got to take the responsibility that,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true. And
so
hey, that's admirable. A lot of people aren't really willing to be like, yeah, I messed up.
you'll be stuck forever, right? If you, that's a limiting belief.
Yeah, for sure.
That's, you'll hold yourself in a bad spot. But yeah, in the deployment too is cool. One night we flew, well, it is what it is, but we flew the night that this past April, Iran launched at Israel directly. We just happened to be flying that night. We refueled the F-15s that really thwarted the main assault at Israel. It was the first time Iran ever launched directly at Israel. And we were with a handful of crews that flew that night, and we all got back and they gave us the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is our nation's fourth highest award, three beneath the Medal of Honor. So it was just, and that was just so special to just think about. I never thought that was going to happen. Just sometimes you're sometimes things, you just got to focus on the main thing, do the right thing
Right.
moment by moment.
Yeah, I truly admire you trying to put something, I don't know how else to say it, so badass in just simple terms. But yeah, that is amazing. I'm really proud of you and your crew for being able to get through that, and also having the honor of being recognized for it is huge too. How did that feel in the moment, being recognized for that and then receiving the award? Is it something that is like a good memory for you, or does that weigh heavy? Is there like pressure? Is like what comes with that?
Yeah, I would say it was a long process. Like, we had to get nominated, and then I had to go through like Congress and then come back. So I had some time to process it, but in the moment, it was really nice. And again, probably you and I are in the same spot. I don't like talking about myself either, and I don't like compliments. It makes me cringe, but I'm working on it. But so I had to work through that with receiving this award, and I don't. Do I believe I'm as deserving as the other people that received it? I mean, this award was given to Buzz Aldrin and a lot of the other astronauts and Charles Lindbergh, and the list is on and on. There's many presidents that received this award, and it's just crazy. And some of the stories that you read, the plane was on fire and they're saving their crew from it while it's flying. And so, do I believe I'm as deserving as a lot of the people that, or most of the people that received this? No, I don't, but I'm very grateful for it, and I do connect with them, though. Each one of them has a story that of that night, their sortie that they got that medal for. They'll never forget it, and there's YouTube videos that you can go and watch. They're all telling their story, and they'll remember that night forever, and that's the way I connect with them. Is I'll never forget that sortie, that night that I flew, and the crew that I was with, and they were excellent. That team, the crew that we go with, we've got a pilot, a co-pilot, and a boom operator, and we're together. We eat together. We stay in the same little dorm together. We drive to work together. We drink beers together. We eat dinner together. Eat every meal, and then we're in an airplane for 8 hours every day, or any day that we fly together.
Oh my goodness.
It kind of goes through the phase like you're like, oh, we hate each other, and then we're like, oh no, we're cool, and then you like,
Honestly, I really appreciate your honesty with that. The feelings that through you and that you experienced receiving that distinguished flying cross. And I'm sure that it made your grandpa proud, I'd like to say. And like you mentioned, yeah, you're just like, oh yeah, like this whole thing, like whatever, just trying to not put the attention on you. But you got to give credit where credit is due. And like you said, there was a nomination process and everything. So you are deserving of that. I hope you know that. I know you're humble. I know you're just trying to brush your shoulders off, play it cool, but no, I'm going to give you your flowers and you're going to take them. So that is amazing. And I'm so incredibly honored to have somebody that has that award on my podcast. That's really awesome. And I do ask, how does that sit with you? Because I know certain awards are very prestigious and they're so honorable and all of these good things. But I do know that with certain awards, it's like some people are like, yes, I had my ceremony, I was pinned, I was given the award, and it's just one of those things that I won't ever wear again. So it's just something that, whether military or like civilian wise, I definitely try to touch on, because sometimes there's those like bittersweet moments as you're being pinned or given the award that might run through your head. And so sometimes I like inserting myself in there just to see what that experience, what that honor is like, because I will never experience that. I will never know that. So thank you for sharing.
yeah, I'm gonna try as hard as I can here. I appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, like real talk. I saw a video, I think it was on like Instagram or something, but it was like most men only receive flowers when they pass away. And I was like, oh shit, that broke my freaking heart. I was like, stop. Oh my
Did you
God.
ever you ever watch Bill Burr, the
Yes.
comedian? He's
Yeah.
nobody buys me flowers. Nobody calls me pretty.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. And that's also a really great point. You're a man, you're a husband, you're a father, and you're working on your mental health. You're very open about that. I love that. I want more of that. But my thing that I'm constantly experiencing is the male loneliness epidemic. Can we call it that? I think it is an epidemic. And I'm just over here full of love. Some days I am a ray of sunshine, and some days it's like that tough love that you need. Okay, you can keep pushing me away, or you can tell yourself, like, oh no, I don't deserve this. But like platonic love is so important. So with my guy friends, I'm always hyping them up. Like, I will make you uncomfortable because you're not used to that kind of intimacy or that type of appreciation, but it's simply platonic. It's still respectful, but it's like you need to be able to hype up your guy friends. They need the love. We're seeing the effects of male loneliness, or post COVID, things just haven't been the same. And then I saw that video about men not receiving flowers and only on their deathbed. I'm just like, oh my God, I need to go buy my dad flowers. And then he's probably going to be like, he's going to say something like smart assy, but still, the sign or the expression of affection is there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough, especially if going back to what we were talking about. For me, it's really hard for me to accept any sort of affection. This stuff in relationships that I have to really work on. Trauma bonding, you're probably with mine. I had a really tough relationship with my mom, and tendency to start like overlaying that on your closest relationships, and where you're constantly like, no, I got to earn it, and if I don't feel like I'm doing good, I don't deserve it. Don't give me
Oh,
that. I don't deserve it.
yeah. Yeah. I
That was
mean,
a tough one for me.
I'm gonna one up you here. I have both mommy and daddy issues. I like to joke and say that these days I'm giving them daughter issues. It's, hey man, we're repairing this relationship. You got to show up, you got to talk, you got to communicate. All of those things that were not
Yep.
normal growing up, it's going to be normal. Sometimes I find myself really acting like my grandmother on my dad's side, so like my nona, my grandma, his mom, and I'm just like, man, I like it. I'm channeling this energy. It's very assertive and I'm here for it. So, yeah, the mommy and daddy issues thing is very real. And I'm like,
You're setting boundaries. That's
yeah,
awesome. Good for you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the generational curses, it ends here. I'm over it. I'm tired. And especially in a Hispanic household, like love and affection aren't always expressed verbally, but through acts of service and stuff. And sometimes it's to the point where it's unhealthy, like the people pleasing and almost too subservient and stuff. I'm really trying to make an effort of cutting out those bad habits that we've
The chocolate.
normalized. Yeah, in childhood. And I'm just like, I'm 30 years old and sometimes I still feel like a child because they're still engaging in certain ways. And I'm just like, no, we're not doing that. I mean, I only have a bachelor's, but they call me the family therapist. It's a hard job to have for sure.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, my on my mom's side of the family, it's his Mexican Puerto Rican, which I'm actually really proud of that. My dad's just white.
Okay. Okay, so you get it.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's they communicate by screaming and throwing things at each other.
Oh my god, the chancla.
The chancla.
Not the chancla. Oh, James, it has been so great chatting with you. I did ask my audience if they had any questions for a pilot. I tried to keep your identity unknown just because I just wanted to gatekeep it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have him on my podcast. Like, but also just generic questions. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna
Yeah, go
ask
for it.
you a few of those. So somebody asked, can you walk us through your first solo flight and what was that like?
The first solo, it's definitely scary because normally you've got somebody else in the cockpit that's talking with you, and you're used to hearing this other person walk you through things, and all of a sudden it's silent. You hear every little any noise, any crack, anything like, and it's just like, oh, what was that? Oh, what was that? What was that?
Yeah.
Okay, everything looks like it's still together. Okay, we're okay. I think we're good. We're good. And then you hear a little rattle over here. And you're like, so it's nerve wracking in that way. But once you get done, for civilians, we have a ceremony, right? We cut the back off their shirt that they flew with and hang it on the wall. You keep that forever. And the Air Force, we run you down and throw you in a pool of water for whatever reason.
Oh, I love that. That's so interesting. I didn't know that. Okay. And then somebody else asked if you have a favorite aircraft that you've flown.
Yeah, I think that my favorite aircraft that I've flown, it's lame for me to say it this way, but I actually really enjoy flying the tanker, the KC-135.
Mm.
The things like 19 it was 1950s technology. The planes that I fly are normally like 58, 59, 60, 61, something like that, and they made that plane on a slide rule back in the day. That's one of the original airliners. And so it's just crazy, no computers, and it's a plane that's extremely challenging to fly, and it actually requires the crew to work together
Mm.
to accomplish our missions and stuff. So it's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. All right. And another one was if you could go back and relive one flight, which one would it be and why?
One flight. You know what? I'm gonna hit you with one here. Let's see if I can make it through this. My dad died 2 years ago, back in 2022, and he was the one that encouraged me to be an Air Force pilot. And we'd always talking about. I saw or my dad always brought it up. He's like, the Air Force Museum is in Dayton, Ohio, where the Wright brothers were, and Patterson Air Force Base. And it's humongous Air Force Base in the world. It's huge museum, and it takes you like 3 or 4 hours to make it through. And I always promised him I was going to take him out there, and I was able to do it before he died. And we flew a private plane. I flew him up there.
Oh,
Actually, in
wow.
one of the planes that's in this hangar.
Oh, James, I'm so sorry for your loss, but that had to be a just an unreal feeling for you. Yeah, I think both you, your father, and your grandfather would be really proud of just the man that you are today, accomplishments aside. That doesn't hurt either. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really nice. And then I have a question. Let's see. What's one piece of aviation wisdom that's stuck with throughout your whole career?
Aviation wisdom. I really like the Air Force's motto of CRM, crew resource management, and it's fancy word for teamwork. Back in the day when it was like Pan Am, right? That was like the big airline. They were called sky gods, and the captain of the plane was like this sky god, unquestionable. Nobody questions the captain, and they would fly into sides of mountains and no one would say anything in the cockpit. And the other people in the cockpit knew they were flying into a mountain. They land with the gear up, all this stuff. And I really like this concept because they start realizing, like, oh crap, like we're losing a whole bunch of planes because there's an asshole in the cockpit he's putting down the other people. He's not taking their input and their feedback. And so Pan Am actually hit this first, but the Air Force had to follow and really pump this out of their culture that, hey, there's no rank in the cockpit. If you see something, please speak up. I'm a human. I'm a people make mistakes. Say something. And then we always debrief at the end. Hey, what were some areas in CRM, like maybe where I could have communicated better or not, stuff like that. And we have a whole hour debrief that we go through this. Fighter pilots do like a 3-hour debrief. So
Wow.
I think that's probably the best thing.
Yeah, I agree. That level of humility and just rationality is crucial, especially in something so detrimentally risky like aviation. There's no rank in the cockpit. Okay. Good to know. All right. Now, this podcast is called Resilient and Rowdy. So, one thing that I must ask is, what does resilience mean to you?
What comes to my mind is a saying that I've heard that they can't beat you if you keep showing up. And it's the same thing that I learned in basic training. Is if you can just make it from breakfast to lunch and not give up.
Yeah.
That's what comes to my mind. Being resilient is just, even though outside factors or anything, even if everything looks bad, right? Most people give up. It's easy to give up, but if you can just make it one more minute. There's actually a book written about that. It's like the art of one more, I think is what it is. Or maybe it's the rule of one more. It's, can you make it one more minute? And his thing was alcohol, right? So he's, can I make it? He would ask his dad, are you going to be sober for the rest of your life? And he says, well, I don't know that. I know I'm going to be sober for the rest of today though. So
Just
you
that
just
is
need one more.
so beautiful and simple. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but I can be a little bit of an overthinker. So breaking it down to just one more minute, one more hour, one more day, that's everything. I had a guest, Alex. He said, he like looked at the squad of guys that he was going through selection with. And he was like, and I picked out one guy that I thought wouldn't make it. And so every day that I saw him, I knew that I had to just show up a little bit better than him. And I was like, some healthy competition doesn't hurt either. I actually had somebody say that to me too. And I'm just like, no, I don't want to underestimate her. And she's just a girl. She's just trying to pass basic training just like I am. But lo and behold, we both made it. So it's like, hell yeah, girl. I won't say her name, but I still think of her time to time. But yeah, thank you for that. I really do feel like you've truly embodied resilience throughout all of your endeavors. And I just genuinely admire your ability to like self-assess, self-critique when need be, and hopefully in a productive way. Not too much. It's like your
Working.
therapist. That's, yeah, you need to be nicer to yourself. And it's like the meme goes, yeah, you dumb bitch, be nicer
Yeah,
to yourself.
that's right.
So you get it. But yeah, that I think that you do embody resilience. So it's really nice to see you share your endeavors and your journey here with us. But what about, do you ever find yourself getting a little rowdy or having some fun? Like, how do you let loose?
I definitely so I've got a boat and we live on the lake, and I really like to party on the lake.
Oh, I love
You
that so
know,
much.
everyone ties up the boats, and we just have a good time hanging out. So, yeah, loud music, obviously drinks and have fun.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. All that. I love that for you. You deserve that.
in a healthy context, right? Like every day, moderation. There's another thing from
Very true.
talk
Work
about
hard,
people
play hard.
pleasing, not moderation, but that's
Mm,
in there.
yeah, I love that. What kind of music do you like to listen to on the boat?
I live in Tennessee, right? There's a whole lot of Morgan Wallen and country music, or maybe like some Tiesto, Marshmello.
Ooh, okay, yeah, a little bit of both. I like that. That's super fun. All right. Now, as we wrap things up, James, is there anything exciting that you're working on? Anything that is in the works that we can look forward to?
Yeah, so this year, pretty cool. I've really just tried to really commit more to trying to get my brand out there and doing my podcast that focuses on aircraft owners and business owners, kind of aircraft and business. And then this year, hopefully later this year, launch my first book. that focuses on aircraft ownership 101. Those are like little pieces outside of our physical services, like maintenance and upgrades that we do behind us. I'm excited, really excited about those.
That's amazing. That's so pumped. You got to keep me updated with that. But so you have your own podcast. Where can people find that and find you if they want to check out your content or if they have any questions?
Yeah, so at the James Spearman on social media, there'll be links to my Spotify there. It's the James Spearman Show on Spotify or www.spearmanaircraft.com.
Oh, beautiful. All right, y'all. Resilient and Rowdy Gang. Be sure to check him out. Outstanding dude. If you're into aviation, if you have any questions, I will be sure to keep my audience updated when your book is launched. And that's super exciting. But thank you so much for your time today and being vulnerable with us and giving us this bird's eye perspective of aviation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.